Welcome into College Football Now. I'm your host, Harrison Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at HGrahamNFL, but really, college football is my favorite sport. Ignore the NFL in my name, but I do love the NFL as well. Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC. A report dropped a couple of days ago that they have inquired, and 48 hours later, it sounds like it's rapidly moving in that direction. Let's talk about it here. Kirk Bohls of the Austin American-Statesman had this earlier today. Prominent Big 12 source tells the American-Statesman that Texas and Oklahoma move to the SEC is almost done. Quote, they've been working on this for a minimum of 6 months, and the Texas A&M leadership, this is kind of funny, was left out of discussions and wasn't told about it. Move could become official in a week. So I'm got a lot of thoughts on this on a lot of different angles, but first, want to get you guys involved in the show. If you've never watched Chat Sports before, we love you guys' interaction in the comment section. What is your one-word reaction to Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC if it happens? It is not official yet. We want to make that very, very clear, but if it goes down, what is your one-word reaction to Texas and OU leaving the Big 12 for the SEC? So I've got 3 major takeaways and then some thoughts about what the future of college football in terms of realignment could look like. Number 1, OU and Texas and OU, my producer's an OU alum, so he had to put OU first, have acted very shady throughout this entire process. You go to that tweet there, this has been in the work of 6 months. So let's just rewind a couple of days, right? 2 days ago, Wednesday, Houston Chronicle says, hey, Texas and Oklahoma have inquired about the SEC. Obviously caught a lot of people's attention. Not a ton of movement after, in the first hour or two of what that could mean. Obviously more and more trickled out after that. Thursday, Big 12 sets up a meeting with all 10 athletic directors for all 10 conference members, including Texas and Oklahoma, CEOs of each university as well. Texas and Oklahoma declined to partake in that meeting. That is garbage from both the University of Texas AD Chris Del Conte and Joe Castiglione. I knew I was going to get that one right. Joe Castiglione of Oklahoma to not partake in that meeting. Man up, say, hey, you know what? The Big 12's been, in trouble for several years now. We feel like this is better for our schools, but to just not even participate in the meeting, I think it's shady by Del Conte. I think it's shady by Oklahoma as well. I think it's a bad look. And then you fast forward to Friday, and you think about this even further. It's been in the work for 6 months. On one hand, I'm impressed that they've been able to keep this quiet, both of these schools and whoever else has been involved in discussions. By the way, the ACC has reportedly reached out as well, potentially some other conferences. You could assume the Big Ten and Pac-12. We'll never know for sure until that gets reported. But the whole thing has been shady. Be a man. It's not a big deal. Like, hey, I don't blame them for doing this. It's just the way they've done it. I'm just not a big fan of how Oklahoma and Texas have operated for what sounds like has been 6 months for a while. Very shady business. Who will do better in the SEC? I want to know from you guys. Type OU for Oklahoma. Type UT for Texas. I think right away it'll be Oklahoma. I mean, they've been running the Big 12 for quite a while, and obviously I'm focusing more on football here. I'm not talking about, other sports, academics, etc., but who's going to fit in better? Oklahoma, Texas, get your votes in right now. My second takeaway, to be fair, this is probably a smart long-term move for Oklahoma and Texas. I don't like the shady behavior. I've made that clear. I'm going to continue to preach that. But listen, the Big 12's TV deals are up in 2025. There was almost an implosion in the conference back in 2009, 2010, in that time frame as well. Remember the Pac-16 and all this stuff was going to happen, but at the last second, the Big 12 held together, largely due to Texas, by the way. So, they did keep the conference together for another decade. But, hey, there's a couple of good reasons. Financial, you're going to make more money in the SEC. Long-term recruiting. I mean, I think they've seen what Texas A&M has done, largely out-recruiting Texas and Oklahoma since leaving the Big 12. If A&M can do that by joining the SEC, you don't think Texas and OU can? Of course they can. There's just a lot of upside to being in the SEC. Now, you're not going to run the SEC like you've run the Big 12, so get used to that, especially Texas, who has had a ton of power in the Big 12 despite not producing on-field success in well over a decade. You are not going to run the SEC. Let's make that very, very clear. But it's the best-run conference. It's got the best competition in football. I can certainly see the appeal, but, again, don't love the shady behavior. More thoughts on this coming up. But first, hey, if you want more college football coverage, I'm the biggest college football fan on the planet. I would like to do more videos on college football here on Chat Sports. Normally what we do is a lot of NBA coverage, NFL, some college football during the season, some Major League Baseball for big events, but we're always looking to expand what sports we are covering. So if we get enough subscribers on this video, maybe we can do more college football sports coverage. So go ahead and subscribe today, and hey, go check out our NFL and NBA coverage. It's 100% free. Number 3, and I think this is the obvious takeaway, assuming Oklahoma and Texas leave, Big 12 is going to blow up. I don't see how you can survive if you are the Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. If only one was leaving, I think you could salvage the conference. But now that both apparently are going to bolt for the SEC, again, as soon as a week it sounds like, I just don't see an avenue where the Big 12 tries to survive. The ADs met yesterday. They're obviously going to explore their options moving forward. But if I'm one of the other 8 schools, I'm scrambling. I'm calling the Pac-12. I'm calling the Big 10. I'm calling the ACC. Hey, can we fit in with what you guys are doing? Because there's a decent chance out of the 8 remaining schools, 2, 3, maybe even 4 of them could be left in the dust and out of a power conference. And that is not what you want with how the college football landscape is constantly changing. You got to be in a power conference if A, you want to make a lot of money, and B, if you want to compete to try and be a competitive college football program. So, hey, you're in scramble mode if you're not Texas and Oklahoma. I'm a TCU alum. I'm pretty nervous. I am not going to lie. Is the Big 12 dead? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Get your votes in on this one. Obviously, nothing's done at this point, but I don't love the Big 12's chances of pressing onward, so I would probably type my Y for yes. So let's shift to kind of the second half of this video. So I've given you the news, the rumors, whatever you want to call it at this point. It's not confirmed news, certainly, but we're heading in that direction where Texas and Oklahoma head to the SEC. So what's next? What does future conference realignment potentially look like? Because there will be counter moves for other conferences. So we'll kind of go step by step here. I've got 5 bullet points here that I think are worth mentioning. Number 1, and I'll call it 1A because 1B really ties in here. Number 1, the Big 12 dissolves, which is what we just discussed there. And the other 8 teams, they go into scramble mode. They spread out. Maybe a few go out west. Maybe a couple go to the Big 10. Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State. That would make sense geographically. By the way, ACC, take West Virginia. Do what's right. That is the right move for that university, and it's a good move for you as well. Jeremy Clark, who's covered TCU for a while for 24/7 Sports, Unnecessary Roughness, tweeted this out about him reporting that TCU, Baylor, and Texas Tech have already reached out to the Pac-12. One source told him the Big 12 is going to blow up, man. And hey, that's kind of what I said, right? Without Texas and Oklahoma, going to be hard to survive. So I think you could see 3 to 4 schools, TCU, Baylor, Tech, maybe Oklahoma State. Maybe they go out west, make the Pac-16 right there. Maybe you get a couple of schools to the Big 10. Kansas basketball is pretty appealing. Maybe they take K-State or Iowa State as well. Iowa's in the Big 10. And then, you know, what happens to West Virginia? What happens to Iowa State and or K-State? One of those might get left out. Could be some trouble. We'll have to wait and see. I think this scenario is the most likely. Big 12 dissolves, other 8 teams spread out. Number 3, because we'll kind of call those first 2, 1A, 1B, 2 bullet points there. Notre Dame. I think the Big 10 and the ACC pursue Notre Dame pretty hard. I think Notre Dame's going to have to join a conference at some point here with the way this is shifting. This feels like the 4 mega conference movement here, where you've got 4 16-team conferences, and those 64 teams are the power teams in college football. And then whatever's left, that's the group of whatever you want to call it. They're the non-power teams. If you're Notre Dame, you're going to get pursued hard by the Big Ten, the ACC. You've got more ties to the ACC in the sense that you played in that conference last year with COVID and everything going on. They hopped on for the one season. You've played basketball and other sports in the ACC for a very, very long time. But the Big Ten, from a rival standpoint, probably makes more sense. Michigan's a pretty big rival for Notre Dame. They've played Michigan State quite a bit over the years. I think you could have a rivalry with Ohio State as well. I think that Notre Dame will be a hot commodity, and I think that the Big Ten and the ACC will pursue this university very, very hard. What do you think is the better fit for Notre Dame? Type A for the ACC, type B for the Big Ten. I actually think the Big Ten makes more sense for Notre Dame, but get your votes in and let me know what you guys think. Number 4, and this one's kind of a wild card. I've seen a few people tweet about this, a couple of blue check marks as well. Could USC get wild and pursue other options for themselves? Could they go to the Big Ten? Maybe. What if the Big Ten got Notre Dame and USC? That's a pretty strong counter move to what the SEC is doing with Texas and Oklahoma, right? Like, you're talking about 2 major universities there who are also rivals in Notre Dame and in USC. That would be a power move if you're the Big Ten. You're like, okay, SEC, you're going to get Texas and Oklahoma. Watch us. We're going to get USC and Notre Dame. That's pretty strong. Could USC flirt with that? The Pac-12 has been dwindling in terms of competition, which is why the Big 12 dissolving potentially is frustrating. The Big 12 has been better than the Pac-12 in football for quite a while now. The Pac-12 has been largely irrelevant. USC to the Big 10 could be very, very interesting. Do not rule this out for USC to pursue other potential options for themselves. And then number 5, kind of circling back to the Big 12, if they want to try to survive, maybe you merge with the American. Maybe you take the remaining Big 12 schools, which is TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State, and then I'm forgetting one more. There's one. I think it's Baylor. I can't remember if I've said them already or not, but there's 8 Big 12 schools remaining. Central Florida, South Florida. That gets you to 10. West Virginia was the other one. So you get the 2 Florida schools there, Cincinnati, Memphis, a couple more, go to 14, 16 teams. It's not the best idea, but if you're trying to keep the Big 12 alive, that's probably your best bet. Maybe you poach Boise from the Mountain West as well, San Diego State if you want to dip into California, because geography at this point, it's out the window, right? Like, Boise State almost joined the Big East a few years ago, and that makes no sense whatsoever. So I think those are some things that could be next if Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC does become official, and I firmly believe it will at this point. What do you think? What is the next big move? Let's say Texas and Oklahoma are to the SEC. What's the next big move after that? What happens? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I know this year in the Big 12 is going to be lit. Teams are going to be booing the heck out of Texas and Oklahoma when they're on the road. And hey, college football, it's always changing. It's always fun. And we want to do more videos about the sport that I love. So subscribe, youtube.com/chatsportstv. And we'll see you next time here on Chat Sports.